Hey you, Meowkaiser coming at you today with... I wanted to talk a little bit about the steel and iron sheets. Is it steel sheets or iron sheets? I don't remember. Iron sheet. So when you make these, you get 2 steel, right? And when you make this, you get 2 iron sheets. Typically, a lot of routes kind of revolve around iron sheets and steel sheets. You can see this when people start school, they'll grab Windbreaker, which both military suit, battle suit, and EOD suit both require an iron sheet, right, to make. You can also go into Rockerjack, which also requires an iron sheet, as well as arm warmers, which again requires an iron sheet. You can also, if you're not able to find the arm warmers, go and grab a sheath, also iron sheet. This actually lets a lot of people be more efficient. The only downside to starting school is that unless you are throw specifically, you kind of have no weapon coming out of this. Throw typically will grab Razor, head to Alley, grab the box cutter, and then they can start making their Fuma shurikens, right? So usually this is started by people that want to armor rush. Most notably Adela can take advantage of this because she doesn't build her weapon anyway. Stab actually starts out of here because they can start working on their weapon when they grab a lighter. They use the lighter and they grab a whetstone for 2 heated whetstones, which allows them to make a rapier. The 2 heated whetstones there. So a lot of things to keep in mind of when you're doing your builds is to keep in mind of like what areas you're likely to be contesting, right? So if you're in a lobby with Stab and Bow very often goes for the steel sheet route because Bow wants to come out of here and use their steel sheet on a steel bow, right? Steel sheet, iron sheet on a steel bow. And Stab will either start uptown, which also has Windbreaker and arm warmers, although they tend to go for the arm warmers later, or school. So something to keep in mind. So like if you, in high level right now, pretty much every Bow player starts factory. There's other starts, but like it's undeniable right now that Ballista is the best bow right now. Just because the armor setup is so nice. Let's talk about steel for a little bit. So 2 steel requires you to either use one of the steel for a weapon, right? So if you want to use it for a weapon, for example, you can go Hades Edge with your blade. Stab you can also do with Hades Edge, it's a blade stab. Unless you're Fiora, although Fiora is a different story. For blunt, you can actually go Plasma Tonfa. I can talk about that a little bit later. Throw will typically build 6 times steel, use 4 of them for their Bone Crusher and the other 2 for a steel set. Gun, sometimes you see 4 times steel with Elegance, because you need 2 to make Elegance. Bow doesn't really have a steel set, although sometimes what you'll see people do is they'll build like a Huacha, for example. I believe this requires steel. This does not require steel, or a twin bow and do a steel set out of that. Hands, you'll usually see either Brazil Gauntlet or Ariman hand if they want to do that. But to keep it simple, you basically want to use one of your steel for either. You gotta keep in mind 3 things. You're going to be making either arm gear, clothes, or weapon with your 2 steel, right? And one of those you have to flex somehow. So you have to keep that in mind in your build. For example, Blunts will use one of their steel for their weapon, right? Because they'll use it when they go for a Tonfa here. But because they're also building Bishop's Cassock, they can have it over to Tunnel, which they're going to anyway. Because they need to get the short rod here, and then they need to get the Conwork Glove here to finish their Tonfa. There's pickaxes and gemstones here. And super early in the game, you're very likely to find those pickaxes. So you should be planning your routing around how you intend on using your steel, iron sheets or your steel, depending on what exactly you want to do, as well as what other people are doing. That's kind of the basic concept. You can also like consider food options, but in general, most routes revolve around steel and iron sheets. Anyway, if you're going steel, you have to keep in mind several areas. So you want to keep in mind a temple and archery range. If that closes, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, because that's your only areas for fabric armor. Archery range is pretty nice because you can get your glasses and feather here at the same time. Temple's also nice because it has cloth over here, so you gotta consider what you need, and it also allows for a quick accessory where you can just make Buddhist Sara if you don't have one already. And then the other areas you need to keep in mind of, especially early game, is where you're going to find your leather, right? So, ideally, you want to be making your shield from well, because both turtle shell and leather are there. And so you might be wondering, hey Meowkaiser, why would you go here when there's only 4 leather, when you go here where there's 6, right? And the answer to that question actually, well, it depends. It depends on how many different things you can work on at the same time. So, if I need both leather and a turtle shell, I can grab that here. I can also grab the iron ball and start making my boots. I can grab mudfish and ice for my stamina, right? Stamina and food. So, like, that's an example of, like, doing multiple things at once. Or, like, for example, I could take the bike helmet, make a fire helmet, and then, you know, make a racing helmet and hero helmet later in the game. So you want to be overlapping a lot. But, like, let's say you have a bunch of boiling water, right? Well, then you can go forest, you can start making oriental concoctions out of there. Let's say your hands, for instance, you know, you could use claw with iron ore. But typically hand would do forest steel out of that set. Another thing to keep in mind is when you get corpses, right? So sometimes you'll get a corpse and then it'll completely invalidate one of your steals. A lot of newer players, their first response is to drop the extra steel. If you can hold it, now obviously if you have a full inventory and you find food and you have a steel clogging up your inventory from picking up that food, and you don't need that steel anymore, then you drop the steel. But if you still have the steel, for example, instead of making battle boots, you could make EOD boots because you have the extra steel. Because usually you would just go for battle boots because you only made 2 steel. But that's just another option you have. Typically you want to go for battle boots, but, you know, this is a decent upgrade. And the second steel can actually be used for your orange weapon, right? Because every orange weapon requires steel. That's just the reality of it. Because you gotta make motor. And so you would have a lot of it out of the way. The only thing you would have to worry about is making the flint and the electronic parts. And so this starts overlapping really fast, because you can just go to tunnel, you can grab stone, gunpowder, make your flints there and the wire, and then you can just head over to get your battery, and then you already got the arcane motor, which is really powerful. That's how you do it really quickly. In some games, sometimes you'll find when animals drop things, all these things are considered ingredients, right? If you see steel, electronic parts, or flint on an animal corpse and you don't need anything else, you should be holding it, just out of habit. You never know when it's going to be useful to you. I see people skipping out on this all the time. It's really only really late in the game where, like, there's, like, what, 3 areas left where you should be keeping an inventory slot open so that when you kill someone, you can take something off their corpse quickly and leave, because people tend to contest it at high level. In lower level, that's almost never going to be the case. You can hold whatever you want. So I hope that that gives you a better rundown on how to handle your inventory and your routing for when you do... I forgot to mention something. I always forget this. Fire Station has leather now. So, just another thing to keep in mind, you can also do boots. So, like, if you grab 2 cloths somewhere, you can go and handle both your boots and your leather requirement for your turtle shell as well. Anyway, I plan on doing more videos like this in the future, so stay tuned. If you liked it, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya!